Welcome to Loyal Paws, home to touching stories between humans and their loyal four-legged friends. Today you'll hear a true story, dramatic yet heartwarming. It was supposed to be a proud moment for a police officer and his loyal dog. But during the medal ceremony, the dog noticed something no one else did, and his actions changed everything. Where are you watching from? Leave your city or country in the comments below. We'd love to know how far this story travels. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next inspiring stories. Now let's begin. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Detective Eliana Reyes's apartment as she adjusted her dress uniform in the mirror, her fingers tracing the polished badge that gleamed against the dark blue fabric. The silver shield represented not just authority, but the culmination of a decade of dedicated service to the Atlanta Police Department. Today was supposed to be a celebration of that service recognition for work that had put her life on the line more times than she cared to count. Behind her, reflected in the mirror's polished surface, stood her partner. The Belgian Malinois sat perfectly still, his muscular frame tense despite his controlled posture. His ears twitched with an unusual alertness that seemed out of place on what should have been a day of celebration. What's got you so wound up, partner? Eliana asked, turning to face her canine companion. Max's amber eyes met hers, intelligent and searching. For a moment, she saw something there that made her pause. A tension, a warning that she couldn't quite decipher. After 5 years together, she had learned to read his subtle signals like a book, and something wasn't quite right. The slight tremor in his left ear spoke volumes to her trained eye. She knelt down, bringing herself to his level, her freshly pressed uniform creasing slightly as she moved. "Hey, buddy," she said softly, running her hand along the side of his face. "It's just a ceremony. We've faced worse than a room full of brass and reporters, right?" Max leaned into her touch but remained vigilant, his gaze never settling, his body coiled with a readiness that Eliana recognized from countless operations. It was the posture he adopted when danger was present, but not yet visible. The ceremony wasn't supposed to start for another 2 hours, but Eliana believed in being early. Preparation and vigilance had kept her alive through situations that should have claimed her life. Just 3 weeks ago, that same instinct had led them to the biggest drug bust in Atlanta PD's history. The memory was still fresh in her mind, vivid in its intensity. They had been patrolling the warehouse district when Max's behavior changed suddenly, the same alert posture she was seeing now. His ears had pricked forward, his stride becoming more deliberate, his attention focused on an abandoned textile factory that had been dormant for years. Following his lead, they discovered a sophisticated operation hidden beneath the seemingly abandoned building. What appeared to be just another victim of economic downturn concealed a labyrinth of underground rooms where the Valdez cartel had established their East Coast distribution hub. Subsequent raid had been intense gunfire, shouting the controlled chaos of a major operation coming together. SWAT officers breaching doors as Max led them unerringly to hidden caches and concealed suspects. What started as a routine patrol ended with 37 arrests and the seizure of nearly $50 million worth of narcotics, along with weapons cache and detailed ledgers that implicated figures throughout the city's power structure. It was that bust that had earned them today's honor, the Commissioner's Medal of Valor, the department's highest commendation. Eliana shook off the memory and reached for Max's tactical vest, not the usual black one they wore on patrol, but a specially decorated one for the ceremony with the Atlanta PD K9 unit insignia embroidered in gold thread. As she moved to put it on him, Max backed away, something he had never done before. "Max," the concern in her voice was evident. She reached for him again, and this time he allowed her to approach, but his muscles were tense under her touch. 7 years on the force had taught Eliana to trust her gut, and right now her gut was screaming that something was wrong. She learned early in her career that ignoring those instincts was a luxury she couldn't afford, not if she wanted to stay alive. Her phone buzzed a text from Captain Darius Winters. "Media's already setting up. Commissioner wants you here early for photos." Another buzz followed. "And Eliana, this is a big day for the department. Let's show them what the K9 unit can do. She read between the lines. The department needed a win, a public relations victory after months of negative press about budget cuts and allegations of excessive force. She and Max were being positioned as the perfect feel-good story, the dedicated Latina officer and her loyal K9 partner keeping the streets safe from drug traffickers. Eliana clipped Max's leash to his collar and headed for the door, her mind cycling through possibilities. Was Max picking up on her own nervousness about the public ceremony? Was he still on edge after the warehouse raid? Or was there something more concrete behind his unusual behavior? In the elevator, Max's agitation grew more pronounced. He paced the small space, something he never did, his nails clicking against the metal floor in an irregular rhythm that matched Eliana's growing unease. The doors opened to the underground parking garage of her apartment building, and Max immediately tensed, scanning the dimly lit space with predatory focus. "Easy, boy," she murmured, her free hand instinctively moving toward where her service weapon would normally be, but today she wore only the ceremonial dress uniform. The garage appeared empty, just the usual collection of resident vehicles and the faint smell of exhaust and oil. The drive to headquarters was short, but Max's unusual behavior continued. He kept turning his head toward the back seat, scanning constantly, his body rigid with alertness. Eliana found herself checking the rearview mirror more often than necessary, half expecting to see someone following them. The Atlanta Police Department headquarters loomed ahead, its modern glass facade reflecting the morning sun in a dazzling display. The plaza out front had been transformed for the ceremony. Rows of chairs arranged in neat lines, a podium draped with the department's colors cameras and sound equipment, positioned for optimal coverage in a sea of blue uniforms, mingling with suits and press badges. As Eliana pulled into her designated parking spot, she noticed Max's ears prick forward, his body becoming even more rigid. "Easy, boy," she murmured, but the words felt hollow. Years of training and experience had taught her that Max's instincts were rarely mistaken. Something in the air had him on high alert, and that meant trouble was brewing. They made their way toward the building, passing through security with familiar nods to the officers on duty. Officer Ramirez gave Max an odd look as they passed. "He okay? Never seen him this wired before." Elena managed a tight smile but said nothing. How could she explain that her dog's behavior had her on edge, that something felt fundamentally wrong about this day that was supposed to celebrate their greatest achievement? As they approached the main hall where the ceremony was to take place, Max suddenly planted his feet. Eliana felt the leash go taut against his resistance. "Come on, partner," she encouraged, but Max wouldn't budge. His eyes were fixed on something ahead, his posture screaming danger as clearly as if he'd spoken the word aloud. The bustling lobby seemed to fade away as Eliana focused on her partner's behavior, trying to see what he was seeing. Police officers, administrative staff, caterers preparing for the post-ceremony reception, media personnel checking equipment. Nothing seemed out of place, and yet Max's reaction told a different story. Captain Winters appeared at the entrance to the ceremonial hall, his face breaking into a warm smile that quickly faltered as he took in the scene. At 55, Winters was a department veteran with salt and pepper hair and the weathered face of someone who had seen the worst humanity had to offer, but still believed in the job. "Everything okay, Reyes? The press is asking for some pre-ceremony photos with our hero team." Eliana opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Max let out a sharp bark, not his usual alert bark, but something more urgent, more desperate. Heads turned throughout the lobby, and Eliana felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. This wasn't like Max at all. He was impeccably trained, disciplined in even the most chaotic situations. Maybe he's just nervous about all the attention. Winters suggested, his voice low. "Lots of strangers, unusual environment. It happens." But Eliana barely heard him. She was watching Max, seeing the way his eyes darted between the ceremonial hall and the people filing in. There was something in his behavior that reminded her of that day at the warehouse. The same intensity, the same urgency. Another bark, sharper this time, and Eliana made a decision. "Sir, I think we might have a situation." Her hand instinctively moved to where her service weapon would normally be, but today she wore only the ceremonial dress uniform. Winters' expression darkened. Reyes, there are reporters out there. The commissioner, the mayor. We can't delay the ceremony because your dog is having an off day. This isn't just about you and Max. It's about the entire department. Eliana felt the weight of her badge against her chest, the symbol of authority and responsibility she'd sworn to uphold. But there was another weight too. The weight of trust between her and Max built over countless missions and saved lives. Taverna, through the open doors, she could hear the murmur of the gathering crowd. Everything was in place for a perfect ceremony, except for the dog who had earned it, now refusing to take another step forward. Sir Eliana said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. In 5 years, Max has never given a false alert. Not once. If he's sensing something wrong, I need to trust that. Winters studied her face, then looked at Max, who remained rigid, his attention fixed on the ceremonial hall. What exactly do you think he's alerting on? The bomb squad cleared the building hours ago. I don't know, Eliana admitted, but I need to find out before we proceed. The applause started before Winters could respond. Through the open doors of the ceremonial hall, they could see the police commissioner taking his place at the podium, his voice booming through the speakers as he welcomed the assembled crowd. Captain Winters shot her a final warning look before hurrying to his assigned seat in the front row. Max's growl was so low that only Eliana could hear it, a rumble that seemed to resonate through the leash and into her bones. She had heard that sound exactly twice before in their partnership, once during the warehouse raid, when they'd cornered a suspect with a concealed weapon, and once when they had tracked an armed fugitive to an elementary school. Both times it had preceded violence. Ladies and gentlemen, the commissioner's voice carried through the speakers. Today we honor two of Atlanta's finest. Eliana dropped to one knee beside Max, her white gloves forgotten as she ran her hands through his fur, feeling for the subtle changes in muscle tension that would tell her what he was sensing. His eyes never left the hall's entrance, and his body trembled with barely contained energy. Their recent operation resulted in the largest drug seizure in our department's history. The words faded into background noise as Eliana's training took over. She scanned the room with new eyes, not as a decorated officer at her own ceremony, but as a cop looking for trouble. The usual security was in place. Uniformed officers at each entrance and metal detectors at the doors. Bomb squad sweep completed hours ago. But Max's behavior suggested something had slipped through. A flash of movement caught her attention. One of the catering staff was moving differently than the others. His steps, too, measured too purposeful. He carried a large silver coffee urn toward the dignitary's table, but his grip seemed unusually careful, as if Max's ears flattened against his skull. And now please welcome Officer Eliana Reyes and her K9 partner Max, Noina Nekran. The spotlight swung toward the entrance where Eliana stood, momentarily blinding her. In that instant, she saw the caterer's hands move toward the urn's lid, saw Max's muscles bunch beneath her fingers, and made her choice. Down, Eliana's command voice cut through the applause. Everyone down! Instead of moving forward to receive their commendation, Eliana and Max burst into action. They crossed the distance to the caterer. In seconds, Max's powerful body launching forward with deadly precision. The man reached for something beneath his jacket, but Max was faster, his jaws clamped around the suspect's arm as Eliana tackled him from behind. The coffee urn crashed to the floor, spilling not liquid, but a mess of wires and circuitry. The hall erupted in chaos. People screaming, chairs scraping, security rushing forward with weapons drawn. But Eliana's focus remained on the suspect, her knee in his back as she secured his hands behind him. Clear the hall. Captain Winters' voice cut through the chaos. Bomb squad front and center. Eliana heard the rapid evacuation behind her, felt the rush of bodies moving toward the exits, but she didn't take her eyes off the suspect. Max maintained his hold, a low growl emanating from his throat. He's not alone. The man spat out blood trickling from where he'd bit his lip during the takedown. You're too late. A crackle of static came from the man's earpiece, followed by words that made Eliana's blood run cold. Package 2 is in position. Max's head snapped toward the back of the hall where a second catering cart stood abandoned near the fire exit. Eliana's mind raced through the implications. 2 bombs meant to funnel panicking people toward what they thought was a safe exit. Winters. Eliana shouted, maintaining her hold on the first suspect. Secondary device by the fire exit, and get me a radio. The next few minutes were a blur of coordinated chaos. The bomb squad worked with practiced efficiency, securing both devices while tactical teams swept the building. Eliana's hands never left the first suspect, and Max never relaxed his vigilant stance. Detective Marcus Chen, the department's lead bomb technician, approached with a grim expression. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled sweat beading on his forehead despite the building's air conditioning. "You were right," he said, his voice low. Both devices were live, sophisticated, 2 military-grade components, remote detonation capability. Whoever built these knew what they were doing. "Any idea what we're dealing with?" Ilana asked, her eyes never leaving the suspect, who was now being processed by 2 uniformed officers. "Signature looks like cartel work." Chen replied, "Similar to devices we've seen in border states, but more advanced. They weren't just looking to cause casualties, they were trying to make a statement." No. Captain Winters joined them, his face ashen. "The second device was bigger than the first," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "If it had gone off when people were running that way..." He left the sentence unfinished. Eliana nodded, her fingers absently stroking Max's ears. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her hands slightly shaky. "Max knew," she said softly. "He knew the moment we arrived." "Reyes," Winter started, then paused. "Eliana, I should have listened. We all should have. If you hadn't trusted his instincts..." "Oh, trust goes both ways, sir," Eliana replied, looking down at her partner. Max's eyes were alert, still scanning the area for threats. "That's what makes a good team." Winter stood, brushing off his dress uniform. "Well, I guess we'll have to reschedule the ceremony. Though after today, I think we might need to upgrade the commendation." Eliana didn't respond immediately. She was thinking about the suspect's words. He's not alone. The cartel had reached farther than anyone had imagined, had almost succeeded in their revenge. And something told her this wasn't over. Max lifted his head suddenly, his eyes focusing on something in the distance. Eliana felt herself tensing again, ready for whatever might come next. Whether it was a new threat or just lingering paranoia, she knew one thing for certain: she would trust Max's instincts over protocol every time. A soft breeze carried the scent of cordite from the bomb squad's controlled detonation, mixing with the afternoon air. Eliana stood, straightening her now wrinkled dress uniform. "Come on, partner, we've got work to do." Eliana sat in the emergency response truck, her hand resting on Max's back as the bomb squad finished their sweep of the building. Her mind drifted to their first meeting 5 years ago at the Atlanta Police Department's K-9 training facility. She had been different then, younger, more rigid in her beliefs about protocol and procedure. That was before Max taught her that sometimes instinct trumped everything else. The memory was crystal clear. The humid Georgia morning, the nervous energy of 6 potential handlers waiting to be paired with their K-9 partners. Eliana had spent weeks preparing, studying every manual, memorizing every procedure. She thought she knew exactly what to expect. She was wrong. "Reyes," Sergeant Victor Alvarez had called out, "You're up first. Let's see if any of our friends here take a shine to you." She had walked into the training yard where 5 Belgian Malinois waited in their kennels. 4 of them immediately approached their gates, tails wagging, eager for interaction. But it was the 5th dog, the one who stayed back, watching her with calculating amber eyes, that caught her attention. "That's Max," Alvarez said, following her gaze. "A bit of a lone wolf, that one. Brilliant, but he doesn't play well with others. Failed out of 2 handler programs already." Ilana approached Max's kennel slowly. He didn't move, didn't wag his tail, didn't show any of the eager behaviors the other dogs displayed. He simply watched her head slightly tilted, as if he was solving a puzzle. "Hey there," she said softly, crouching down to his eye level. Heard you're a tough one to impress. Max's ear twitched, the same subtle movement she had learned to read so well over the years. Then he did something that made Alvarez gasp. He approached the gate and sat down, his eyes never leaving Eliana's face. Well, I'll be damned, Alvarez muttered. That's the first time he's shown interest in anyone. The next 3 months of training had tested them both. Max was everything Alvarez had said, brilliant but headstrong, capable, but unwilling to follow commands he didn't agree with. Eliana quickly learned that traditional training methods wouldn't work with him. You're trying to force him into a box. Alvarez told her one particularly frustrating day. Max isn't a tool to be programmed, he's a partner to be understood. Those words changed everything. Eliana stopped trying to make Max conform to the manual and started learning his language instead. She studied his subtle signals, the twitch of an ear, the tension in his shoulders, the different pitches of his whines. In return, Max began responding to her in ways that amazed even the veteran trainers. Their breakthrough moment came during a training exercise gone wrong. They were practicing building searches when a support beam in the abandoned warehouse they were using collapsed. Eliana was cut off from the exit, trapped in a pocket of space as dust and debris rained down. Standard protocol called for K9s to retreat and wait for rescue teams, but Max ignored protocol. He found a path through the debris that the human rescuers couldn't see, guided Eliana to safety with a series of barks and movements that seemed almost supernatural in their precision. That's not something you can train, Alvarez had said afterward, watching Eliana clean a small cut on Max's paw. That's something that comes from trust, real partnership. A loud bang from the bomb squad's operation snapped Eliana back to the present. Max's head lifted from her lap, his eyes alert but calm. The trust they had built that day in the warehouse had only grown stronger over the years. Captain Winters approached his phone in hand. We got something from the bomb techs. The devices, they weren't amateur, work professional, grade military components. Whoever's behind this has serious resources. Eliana nodded her hand automatically, finding the spot behind Max's ear that always helped him focus. The cartel's not just angry, they're desperate. That bust 3 weeks ago must have hurt them more than we thought. Which means they'll try again. Winters said grimly, we got lucky today. If Max hadn't, luck had nothing to do with it. Eliana interrupted, her voice firm. Max knew, he always knows. Winters studied them both for a moment. You know, I remember when Alvarez told me he was pairing you two together. I thought he was crazy. Max had already washed out 2 handlers, and you were so by the book back then, I didn't think you'd last a week. Eliana smiled, remembering her own doubts from those early days. I thought the same thing, but Alvarez saw something we didn't. He saw 2 stubborn perfectionists who needed to learn to trust their instincts. Winters chuckled. Speaking of which, our friends in holding aren't talking, but forensics found something interesting in their phones. Looks like they were getting updates about your movements all morning. Eliana felt Max tense under her hand. We've got a leak. Seems that way. Question is, how high up does it go? Before Eliana could respond, Max's head snapped toward the building's entrance. His muscles coiled, ready for action. But this time, Eliana didn't need to ask what he sensed. She had learned his language too well over the years. Someone's coming, she said, standing. Someone who doesn't belong here. Winters reached for his weapon, trusting her interpretation of Max's behavior without question. It had taken 5 years, but Eliana's partner had earned that trust from everyone in the department. Now, as they faced whatever was coming, she knew that the bond forged in training and tempered by countless operations would be tested once again. Max's low growl confirmed what Eliana already knew. Their day was far from over. Max's growl deepened as footsteps echoed through the corridor. Eliana pressed herself against the wall, one hand on her partner's collar, the other signaling Winters to cover the opposite side. The emergency lights cast strange shadows, but Eliana trusted Max's senses more than her own. The footsteps belonged to 2 people, one heavy, one light. They moved with amateur stealth, nothing like law enforcement's practiced efficiency. Civilians wouldn't be here, not with the building evacuated that left few options, none of them good. Reyes Winters whispered, "Bomb squad still working the West Wing. If there's another device..." She nodded, understanding the implications. The first two bombs had been a distraction. Whatever was coming now was the real threat. Max's muscles tensed beneath her fingers, his signal that the targets were close. Eliana could hear them now, speaking in hushed Spanish. Her years working narcotics helped her catch fragments. Segundo piso, sala de evidencias tiene que arder. Second floor evidence room has to burn. The evidence room. Of course, that's where everything from the warehouse raid was stored. Destroy that and the case against the cartel would collapse. 3 weeks of evidence, cataloging witness statements and surveillance footage. All of it could disappear in minutes. Eliana reached for her radio but stopped. If there was a leak in the department, using official channels could alert the wrong people. She caught Winters' eye and gestured upward, then made a burning motion. His eyes widened with understanding. The footsteps were almost upon them. Eliana took a deep breath, remembering the warehouse training where she and Max had learned to work in perfect silence. They had developed their own language that day, a system of touches and gestures that had saved their lives more than once. One finger on Max's shoulder, wait. 2 fingers ready. A gentle squeeze now. Max exploded into action as the first figure rounded the corner. The man went down hard, his weapon clattering across the floor. Eliana was moving before the second suspect could react, her shoulder driving into his midsection as Winters covered them both. "Poursuit, please don't move," Shurshin. The fight was brief but violent. The first suspect, pinned by Max, knew better than to struggle. The second was younger, more reckless. He managed to land a solid punch before Eliana subdued him, securing the handcuffs with practiced efficiency. The older suspect laughed harsh in the dim corridor. "You think this changes anything? The evidence is already gone." Eliana was already moving toward the evidence room, Max at her heels. They took the stairs 2 at a time, adrenaline masking the pain from what was probably a cracked rib. Each footstep echoed, reminding them that time was running out. The evidence room door was still sealed, its electronic lock showing green. Everything looked normal, but Max's behavior said otherwise. He circled the door once, twice, his nose working overtime. Then he sat staring at the ventilation grate near the floor. Eliana had seen this behavior before. It meant he'd found something dangerous. She dropped to her knees, examining the grate. It had been removed and replaced recently. The screws showed fresh tool marks. "Winters, get the bomb squad up here now." The bomb squad's camera revealed what Max had already known. The ventilation system had been rigged with an incendiary device timed to ignite when the evidence room's climate control kicked in. The planning spoke of inside knowledge. 10 minutes, Detective Chen announced after examining the device. Maybe less, and this thing's got anti-tampering measures we've never seen before. Eliana watched the feed, her mind racing. 3 weeks ago, during the warehouse raid, they had found plans for custom incendiary devices. She had only glanced at them, but the image had stuck. "The trigger mechanism," she said suddenly. "It's not electronic. They're using a chemical reaction like their vehicle bombs. Change in air pressure sets it off." Chen looked at her sharply. "You sure about that?" "No," Eliana admitted. "But Max's..." Her partner had been studying the screen intently, and his behavior, now the specific tilt of his head. The set of his ears was exactly the same as when they had found those plans. Chen hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Okay, that changes our approach." 7 minutes later, Eliana stood watching the bomb squad bag the defused device. Nothing had burned, no evidence had been destroyed, but the close call left her shaken. "How did they get in?" Winters wondered aloud. "This area is supposed to be secure, Shireen." "Same way they knew about the ceremony." Eliana replied, checking Max's vest. "We've got someone on the inside." She looked down at Max, who was still alert. "And I don't think we found all their surprises yet." As if confirming her words, a distant alarm began to sound. Winters' radio crackled. "Captain, we've got a situation in the parking garage. Multiple suspicious vehicles just pulled in." Eliana felt Max tense beside her. The cartel was done being subtle. Now they were coming in force. The response was drowned out by gunfire from below. Eliana met her partner's eyes, seeing in them the same determination she felt. They had stopped. The bomb saved the evidence. But the real fight was just beginning. Ready to go to work, partner? Permissui, humakin honorsuni. Max's answer was a soft whine, not of fear, but of anticipation. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Eliana checked her borrowed weapon as Winters handed her a tactical vest to replace her dress uniform. Another burst of gunfire echoed through the building closer. Now Max's muscles coiled, ready to move. Besides, she added, checking her radio one last time, they interrupted our ceremony. Seems only fair we interrupt their plans too. Winters managed a grim smile. Show them why you two were getting that medal together. They moved toward the sound of gunfire, partners in every sense of the word. The day wasn't over yet, but with Max by her side, Eliana knew they would find a way through. They always did. Gunfire erupted from the stairwell as Eliana and Max descended toward the parking garage. Each shot echoed off concrete walls, making it impossible to tell how many shooters they faced behind them. Winters coordinated with SWAT through his radio. 3 teams converging, 5 minutes out. Reyes, we should wait for backup. Eliana knew 5 minutes was too long. The cartel had planned this carefully. First the ceremony bombs, then the evidence room, and now a direct assault. This wasn't just about destroying evidence anymore. This was about sending a message. Max suddenly froze his head, snapping toward the door. To the second level, Eliana had learned to read this signal years ago. Movement ahead at multiple targets, she held up 3 fingers to Winters, who nodded grimly. A voice called out in Spanish, followed by the distinctive sound of a shotgun being racked. Eliana recognized the dialect Northern Mexico cartel enforcement. These weren't street soldiers. These were professionals. They're blocking the exits, Winters whispered, trying to trap us inside the stairwell. The stairwell door burst open. The first shooter never saw Max coming. The Belgian Malinois launched himself down the stairs with devastating precision, his training taking over as he disarmed the man without lethal damage. Eliana was right behind her partner, using his attacker's distraction to engage the second target. Her shoulder ached from the earlier fight, but adrenaline pushed the pain aside. Winters provided covering fire, forcing the third attacker back through the door. Clear, Eliana called out, securing the fallen weapons. Through the open door, they could hear more hostiles moving into position. Eliana examined one of the seized weapons, a Heckler & Koch G36, not standard cartel issue. They're not just trying to trap us, she realized aloud. These are military grade. They're trying to take the whole building. A burst of automatic fire peppered the doorway, forcing them back. Max's growl deepened a warning she'd heard only a handful of times before Eliana dropped to her knees beside him, trusting his senses. The bullet passed through where her head had been moments before. Sniper Winters called out second level northwest corner. Eliana analyzed their position. They were pinned down, caught between the sniper above and hostiles below. SWAT was still minutes away, and the cartel forces were getting closer. Then she saw at the maintenance access panel Max had been staring at. Every parking structure had them connecting to the building's utility systems. Most people never noticed them, but Eliana and Max had trained for this. Winters, can you keep them busy for 30 seconds? The captain nodded. Make it count. Eliana and Max moved as 1 year of partnership evident in every motion. The access panel opened silently, and they emerged behind the sniper team's position. 2 men, professional gear, completely focused on the stairwell below. Max took down the spotter as Eliana engaged the shooter. The fight was quick, efficient, almost silent. When it was over, she secured them with their own zip ties. These weren't cartel soldiers. She thought, examining their gear. They were mercenaries. RE had silvered Winters, she called through her radio, keeping her voice low. Sniper team neutralized, but we've got a bigger problem. Their leader, it's the demolitions expert from the warehouse raid. Through the sniper scope, Eliana could see him coordinating the assault below. He worked with military precision, directing his men to establish a perimeter, while others set up breaching charges on the interior doors. SWAT's 2 minutes out. Winters responded, whatever you're thinking, Reyes, make it fast. Turnafor Shenokonemoen. Eliana studied the layout. The cartel forces were ready for a frontal assault, but they weren't watching the support columns, assuming no one would be crazy enough to use them as access routes. She looked at Max, saw the same calculation in his posture. They'd practiced repelling scenarios before, though never in these circumstances. The tactical vests had climbing hook standard SWAT gear that might just save their lives. Ready to do something stupid, partner. Mac's soft whine was all the answer she needed. He knew the risks as well as she did, but he also knew they had to stop these men here and now. Using the sniper team's rope, Eliana secured a line to one of the support columns. Max's special harness wasn't available, but the tactical vest straps would have to do. Winters on my signal pushed them toward the east wall, and you might want to have the medic standing by. The next few minutes would become department legend. As Winters and the remaining officers opened fire from the stairwell, Eliana and Max descended from above their shadows, merging with the garage's poor lighting. The cartel forces never saw them coming. Max struck first, targeting the demolitions expert with textbook precision. Eliana was right behind him, her borrowed weapon already firing. Their surprise attack created momentary chaos. SWAT burst through the garage entrance at exactly the right moment, catching the disorganized cartel forces in a perfect crossfire. The battle was over in seconds. Later, as the medics patched up her shoulder and checked Max for injuries, Eliana watched the demolitions expert being led away. Rafael Mendoza, former Mexican Special Forces turned cartel operative. He looked at them as he passed grudging respect in his eyes. "You know what they call your dog in the cartel," he said in perfect English. "El Fantasma, the ghost. They say he can smell betrayal." Guess they were right. Winters joined them, his uniform dusty from the firefight. SWAT found 3 more bombs if they'd managed to set those off. They didn't. Eliana interrupted, her hand finding its familiar place behind Max's ears. "That's what matters." Max leaned against her leg, his posture relaxed but alert. They'd stopped the cartel's plot, saved the evidence, and protected their home. But Eliana couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. "Sir," she said, watching the last of the prisoners being loaded into transport vans. "About that leak in the department," Winters nodded grimly. "I know, but right now you two have earned some rest. We'll deal with that problem tomorrow." Eliana looked down at her partner, saw the same determination in his eyes that she felt tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, but they would face them together as they always had. Sometimes, she reflected, actions spoke louder than ceremonies. Dawn broke over Atlanta as Eliana sat in her office, staring at the evidence spread across her desk. After yesterday's events, sleep had been impossible. Her mind kept racing, piecing together the puzzle that had nearly cost them everything. The photos from the warehouse raid were all there. The weapons cache, the drug shipments, the detailed plans they discovered. But it was a seemingly insignificant detail that had caught her attention. A serial number on one of the communication devices, linking it directly to police-issued equipment. Max lay at her feet, his ears twitching at every sound from the slowly awakening precinct. Though they'd been offered the day off, both knew they couldn't rest until they found the department leak. Someone had helped the cartel, had nearly gotten dozens of officers killed, and Max's instincts had been trying to tell them who all along. Eliana pulled up the security footage from the ceremony. Frame by frame, she watched as Max's behavior changed, not when the first caterer entered, the one with the bomb. No, it was earlier when someone else had walked past them in the lobby. "Lieutenant Blackwood," she whispered, and Max's head snapped up at the name. The head of internal affairs. The man who had pushed hardest for the public ceremony. The man who had insisted on the exact timing, the specific location. Eliana leaned back in her chair, the pieces falling into place. Blackwood had access to everything: case files, evidence logs, personnel assignments. He'd been with the department for 15 years, rising through the ranks without drawing attention to himself. The perfect position to monitor investigations, to know exactly what they had on the cartel, and to make evidence disappear when necessary. A knock at her door made them both turn. Captain Winters entered, his face grim. "You found something?" It wasn't a question. He knew her well enough to read the tension in her posture. Eliana gestured to her evidence wall, where she'd mapped out every connection. "Blackwood's been with Internal Affairs for 15 years, the perfect position to monitor investigations, to know exactly what we had on the cartel, and to make evidence disappear." Winters moved closer, examining the photos. "The question is, can we prove it?" Max stood suddenly, his posture alert, but not aggressive. Moments later, Lieutenant Nathaniel Blackwood himself appeared in the doorway, his usual polished smile in place. At 48, he was the picture of professional success. Tailored suit, perfect haircut, the confident bearing of a man who had never doubted his paths. "Quite early for a debrief, isn't it?" he said smoothly. Especially after such an eventful day, Eliana watched Max carefully. His behavior was different now. Not the urgent warning from yesterday, but something more controlled. She'd seen this before when they were closing in on a suspect who didn't know they had them. "We were just reviewing the security protocols that failed," Eliana replied, matching his casual tone. Trying to understand how the cartel got such detailed information about the ceremony. Blackwood's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. "Yes, quite concerning. I'll be heading up the internal investigation. Of course. We'll need to review all personnel involved." Max moved silently, positioning himself between Blackwood and the door. The lieutenant's eyes darted to the dog, then back to Eliana. His hand twitched toward his jacket. Winters held up a small evidence bag containing Blackwood's backup weapon, a compact .380 they'd found hidden in the building's maintenance area. "Ballistics came back an hour ago. Matches 3 unsolved cartel hits from last year." The change in Blackwood was instant. The polished bureaucrat vanished, replaced by something harder, colder. His posture shifted subtly, weight balanced differently, the stance of a man prepared for violence. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said, voice dropping to a dangerous register. "The Valdez cartel owns this city. Yesterday was just a warning." "No," Eliana corrected the standing. "Yesterday was your last mistake. You were so focused on the ceremony, on making a show of power, that you forgot one thing." She gestured to Max, who hadn't moved a muscle. "You can't bribe a dog's loyalty." Blackwood's break was explosive. He lunged for Eliana, but Max was faster. Years of training culminated in one perfect takedown, pinning the corrupt officer without causing serious injury. Eliana had her cuffs out before he hit the ground. "Lieutenant Nathaniel Blackwood," she recited, snapping the restraints tight. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder of police officers, and corruption under color of authority." As they led him away, Eliana noticed other officers gathering, watching in silence. The betrayal of one of their own would hurt the department, as she knew, but exposing it would make them stronger. Officer Ramirez approached hesitantly. "Is it true Blackwood was working for the cartel?" "For at least 3 years," Winters confirmed. "We found offshore accounts, encrypted communications. He was their inside man, making sure investigations got derailed. Evidence disappeared, witnesses recanted or KBQ." "How did you know Etarshan?" another officer asked, looking at Eliana. She glanced down at Max, who sat calmly at her side. "I didn't. He did." Hours later, Eliana sat in the reconstructed ceremonial hall, Max at her side. The space had been repaired, all signs of yesterday's battle erased. The room was packed again, but this time the security was real, and the attendees were limited to police personnel. Commissioner Hayes approached the podium, his voice carrying clear authority. "Yesterday, we gathered to honor 2 heroes. Instead, they proved themselves even more worthy of recognition. Officer Eliana Reyes and K-9 Officer Max not only prevented a terrorist attack on this department, but exposed a corruption that threatened the very foundation of our justice system." Eliana felt Max shift slightly against her leg as the commissioner continued. She knew her partner wasn't interested in medals or ceremonies. His reward was simpler: the satisfaction of a job well done. A threat neutralized, his partner safe. "The cartel thought they could break us." Hayes was saying, "They thought money could buy loyalty, that fear could overcome duty. They didn't understand what makes a true hero." Elena's hand found its familiar place behind Max's ears as 2 medals were presented. One for her dress uniform, one for his tactical vest. Not that they'd be wearing them often. They were field officers after all. Their place was on the streets, doing the work that really mattered. "Ready to get back to it, partner," she whispered. Max's response was a soft whine of anticipation. Somewhere out there, another case waited, another challenge to face. But they would face it together, as they always had. Because true heroes weren't made by ceremonies or medals. They were made by the choices they faced, the loyalty they showed, and the courage to do what was right no matter the cost. Ileana stood adjusting her uniform one last time. "Come on, Max, let's go to work." As they walked out together, Elena realized that sometimes the greatest victories weren't won in dramatic battles, but in quiet moments of trust between partners. Max had taught her that, and it was a lesson she'd never forget. Behind them, the ceremony continued, but they were already focused on their next mission. After all, the streets of Atlanta needed their guardians, and this pair of heroes was ready to answer the call. The Valdez cartel's attempted strike against the Atlanta Police Department became national news within hours. Media outlets across the country ran headlines about the foiled bombing and the corrupt police lieutenant who had facilitated it. For several days, Elena and Max found themselves at the center of unwanted attention, their faces appearing on news broadcasts and social media feeds. "I hate this," Eliana muttered, turning off the television in the break room, where a reporter was dramatically recounting their heroics, most details wildly inaccurate. "They make it sound like some action movie. That's because most people don't understand what real police work is like," Detective Chen replied, refilling his coffee mug. "They don't see the hundreds of hours of paperwork, the dead ends, the waiting. They just want the exciting parts." Max, lying at Eliana's feet, lifted his head as Captain Winters entered the room. "Good, you're both here," Winters said, his expression serious. "We need to talk about Blackwood and what happens next." They moved to the captain's office, where the blinds were drawn against prying eyes. The walls, usually adorned with commendations and photographs, now held a complex web of connections, faces, locations, dates, all linked to the Valdez cartel's operations in Atlanta. Blackwood's talking. Winters began closing the door behind them. "Trying to cut a deal. Says he can give us names all the way up the cartel's chain of command." "Can we trust anything he says?" Elena asked, settling into a chair, while Max took his customary position beside her. "Probably not entirely," Winters admitted, "but some of what he's given us checks out, including this." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a series of photographs showing a luxurious estate nestled in the Georgia countryside, surrounded by extensive security measures. Emilio Valdez himself, Winters said, tapping one image showing a middle-aged man by a swimming pool. The cartel's Atlanta operation isn't just some satellite branch. It's being run directly by the founder's nephew. He's been living right under our noses for 2 years. Ileana studied the photographs, noting the armed guards, the surveillance equipment, the carefully maintained appearance of legitimate wealth. This explains the sophistication of their operation and why they reacted so strongly to the warehouse raid. "We hit their nerve center," Winters agreed. The warehouse wasn't just a distribution hub. According to Blackwood, it contained financial records for their entire East Coast operation. Max's ears pricked forward at the mention of the warehouse, a detail that didn't escape Eliana's notice. "He remembers," she said softly, her hand finding its way to Max's head. "He knew that place was important even before we went in." Winters nodded. "That's why I wanted to talk to you both. The FBI is putting together a joint task force to go after Valdez. They want you and Max on it." Ilana felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. A task force meant higher profile targets, but also more politics, more scrutiny, more potential for things to go wrong. "What about our regular duties, our community work?" Winters leaned back in his chair. "I told them you'd ask that. The truth is, Reyes, after what happened at the ceremony, you and Max are targets. The cartel doesn't forgive, and they don't forget. Being on this task force might actually be safer than regular patrol right now." Max shifted slightly, pressing closer to Eliana's leg. She knew that Winters was right. The cartel would be looking for retribution, and their usual routines would make them predictable targets. "When do they want us to start?" "Tomorrow morning, 800 Federal Building, downtown. Special Agent Diana Torres will be your contact." Winters slid another folder across the desk. "She's good people. Former DEA, knows the cartel world inside and out." Elena took the folder, already mentally preparing for what lay ahead. "And our cover story, Administrative leave following the ceremony incident." It'll give you freedom to move without drawing attention. As they left Winter's office, Eliana felt the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just another assignment. This was a direct confrontation with one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the hemisphere. An organization that now had a personal vendetta against her and Max. That evening, as they returned to Eliana's apartment, she took extra precautions, varying her route, watching for tails, keeping Max on alert for any unusual presence. The building's security had been enhanced following a quiet word from Captain Winters to the management, but Eliana knew better than to rely solely on cameras and keycards. Inside, she performed her nightly ritual with more care than usual, checking windows, securing doors, placing Max's bed where he could monitor both the entrance and the fire escape. Only then did she allow herself to relax slightly, settling on the couch with the task force briefing materials. Max joined her, his head resting on her lap as she reviewed the files. The Valdez cartel had evolved far beyond its humble beginnings as a regional drug operation. Now it was a sophisticated criminal enterprise with tentacles in legitimate businesses, political influence, and a network of professionals, lawyers, accountants, former military, who kept their operation running smoothly. "We're going up against a small army," she murmured to Max, who looked up at her with those intelligent amber eyes. "But then again, they've never faced a team like us before." As if in agreement, Max pressed his nose against her hand, a gesture of solidarity that had become their private ritual before difficult operations. "Get some rest, partner," she said, closing the files. "Tomorrow we start hunting." The federal building stood in stark contrast to the Atlanta PD headquarters, all gleaming glass and modern security, with none of the worn comfort of their usual workplace. Eliana and Max passed through multiple checkpoints before being escorted to a secure conference room on the 8th floor. Inside, a diverse group of law enforcement professionals was already assembled: FBI agents in their characteristic dark suits, DEA officers with their more casual attire, and representatives from various local agencies affected by the cartel's operations. At the head of the table stood a woman Eliana immediately recognized as Special Agent Diana Torres. In her early 40s, Torres carried herself with the confident authority of someone who had earned her position through competence rather than connections. "Officer Reyes," Torres greeted her, extending a hand. "And this must be the famous Max. I've heard impressive things about both of you." Max remained professionally alert, but relaxed his assessment of the room and its occupants already complete. Eliana had learned to trust his judgment of character, and his calm demeanor told her that he sensed no immediate threats here. "Thank you for having us," Eliana replied. "We're ready to help however we can." Torres nodded, gesturing to the empty seats. "We were just getting started. Let me introduce you to the team." The introductions revealed a carefully assembled group: Agent Marcus Delgado, FBI counter-narcotics specialist; Officer Layla Washington from Atlanta PD's Financial Crimes Unit; Agent Carlos Suarez, DEA Undercover Operations; and several others with specialized skills relevant to the task at hand. Now that we're all here, Torres began activating a large display screen at the front of the room. "Let's talk about Operation Phantom Strike." The screen filled with images of Emilio Valdez and his compound, along with diagrams showing the cartel's organizational structure. Thanks to Lieutenant Blackwood's cooperation and the evidence recovered from the warehouse raid, we now have unprecedented insight into the Valdez cartel's Atlanta operation. For the first time, we have a chance to not just disrupt their activities, but to dismantle their entire East Coast network. Torres clicked through to a new slide showing surveillance photos of various individuals. These are Valdez's inner circle security chief, Javier Ortega, former Mexican Special Forces; financial advisor, Martin Kemp, Harvard MBA, who manages their legitimate businesses and money laundering operations; and Sofia Valdez, Emilio's cousin, who handles their political connections. Eliana studied the faces, committing them to memory. Max, too, seemed focused on the images, his attention unwavering. "Our strategy has 3 phases." Torres continued: intelligence gathering, asset disruption, and finally synchronized arrests. We're currently in phase 1, building a complete picture of their operation before we move against them. Ikajan Delgado took over the briefing. What makes this operation different is our approach. Typically, we target their drug shipments or money laundering first. This time, we're focusing on their security infrastructure. If we can compromise their protection systems, the rest becomes much easier. Torres nodded, which is where you and Max come in, Officer Reyes. Your expertise in tactical operations and Max's unique capabilities give us advantages we've never had before. The meeting continued for another hour with detailed assignments and security protocols established. When it concluded, Torres asked Eliana and Max to stay behind. There's something else you should know, Torres said once they were alone. The attack on your ceremony wasn't just about revenge or destroying evidence. Blackwood finally admitted the real target. What do you mean? Sigh once. Torres pulled up a new file on her tablet. They weren't trying to kill random officers or officials. They were specifically targeting you and Max. Eliana felt a chill run through her. Because of the warehouse raid, partly but mainly because of what Max can do. Torres showed her a cartel communication intercepted after the warehouse bust. They call him El Fantasma, the ghost. They believe he has some supernatural ability to detect their operations. It's become almost a superstition among their ranks. That's ridiculous, Eliana said, though she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride in her partner. Max is extraordinary, but he's not supernatural. He's just exceptionally well-trained and intuitive. Whatever the case, Torres replied, they fear him, and that makes both of you high-value targets. She paused, her expression grave. I need to know you understand the risk you're taking by joining this task force. This isn't just another assignment. Eliana's hand found its way to Max's head, drawing strength from his solid presence beside her. We understand, but this is what we're trained for. And after what they tried to do at our ceremony, this feels personal. Torres studied them both for a moment before nodding. Then let's get to work. Your first assignment is tonight reconnaissance on one of Valdez's nightclubs downtown. We believe it's a front for their money laundering operation. Nari Ikikuguntori. As they left the federal building, Eliana couldn't shake the strange feeling of being watched. Max sensed it too, his posture slightly more rigid than usual as they walked to their vehicle. Stay alert, partner, she murmured. Looks like we've made quite an impression on the Valdez cartel. Max's soft whine was all the acknowledgement she needed. They were in this together, whatever came next. The hunt had begun, but Eliana couldn't help wondering who was hunting whom. The bass from Azul Lounge pulsed through the night air. Its rhythm felt as much as heard from their surveillance position across the street. Eliana and Max sat in an unmarked van, monitoring the comings and goings at the upscale nightclub owned by Emilio Valdez. Target approaching northeast corner, came Agent Suarez's voice through Eliana's earpiece. Black SUV, tinted windows. Eliana adjusted the camera, focusing on the vehicle as it pulled up to the club's VIP entrance. I see it getting images now. Max, sitting beside her in the cramped space, remained perfectly still. His attention fixed on the monitors. He had been specially trained for surveillance operations, understanding the need for absolute quiet and minimal movement. The SUV's door opened and a well-dressed man emerged, flanked by 2 security personnel. That's Kemp, Eliana confirmed, recognizing the financial advisor from their briefing. Looks like he's carrying a briefcase. Good eye, Torres responded from the command center several blocks away. That's what we're interested in. According to Blackwood, Thursday nights are when they reconcile their books, physical ledgers that never touch digital systems. Eliana zoomed in as Kemp entered the club, noting details about his security detail. Guards are armed, concealed shoulder holsters, probably Glocks. Professional stance, not just hired muscle. Can you get Max closer? Torres asked. We need to know if there are more guards inside that we can't see from our positions. This was why they had been assigned to this part of the operation. Max's training allowed him to move through crowds unnoticed, to detect weapons and identify security personnel through scent and behavior patterns. Copy that. Eliana replied, reaching for Max's special harness designed to look like standard service dog equipment, but containing concealed surveillance gear. Moving to position B in 3 minutes. Canaries. She checked her own disguise in the small mirror mounted inside the van. Gone was the police officer in tactical gear. Tonight she wore designer jeans, an expensive blouse, and carefully applied makeup that changed the appearance of her facial features, just enough to avoid recognition. Her hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, now fell in styled waves around her shoulders. Remember Torres' caution, this is observation only. We're building the case, not making a move yet. Understood. Eliana confirmed, attaching Max's leash to his harness. We're just two friends enjoying a night out. They exited the van several blocks away, approaching the club on foot. Like any other patrons, Max walked perfectly at Eliana's side, his bearing that of a well-trained service animal rather than a police canine. To the casual observer, they were just another wealthy young woman and her dog heading for a night on the town. The bouncer at the main entrance raised an eyebrow at Max. Service animal. He asked, his tone suggesting he'd heard every excuse in the book. Ilana produced the fake certification they'd prepared. Medical alert dog, I have seizures. The bouncer examined the documentation, then nodded them through with surprising deference. Later, Eliana would learn that Valdez's younger brother had epilepsy, making the club unusually accommodating to service animals. Inside the club was a sensory assault, flashing lights, pounding music, the mingled scents of expensive perfumes and alcohol. Eliana felt Max press slightly closer to her leg, his way of communicating discomfort without breaking character. I know, she murmured, barely audible over the music. We'll make it quick. They made their way to the bar, positioning themselves with a clear view of the VIP section. Where Kemp had disappeared, Eliana ordered a club soda, maintaining the appearance of a regular patron while her eyes constantly scanned the room. 6 security personnel visible. She sub-vocalized into her concealed microphone. 2 at the main entrance, 2 by the VIP area, 1 at each emergency exit, all armed. Arhman Kidinomiya Kian. Max's subtle shift in posture alerted her to something else. Following his gaze, she spotted a man at the end of the bar who didn't quite fit with the club's upscale clientele. His clothes were expensive but worn incorrectly, the way someone dresses when they're playing a part rather than living it. Possible undercover security at my 2 o'clock. She reported, watching the main floor but trying not to be obvious about it. Copy that, Torres responded. Any sign of Kemp? Negative, still in the VIP area. For the next hour, Eliana maintained her cover, occasionally moving to different positions in the club to gain better vantage points. Max remained vigilant beside her, his behavior impeccable despite the challenging environment. Then everything changed. Max's ears twitched forward, his body tensing in a way that Eliana recognized immediately. Someone dangerous had entered their space. She turned casually as if looking for a friend and felt her blood freeze. Walking directly toward them was Rafael Mendoza, the demolitions expert from the warehouse raid, the same man who had called Max El Fantasma after his capture. But Mendoza was supposed to be in federal custody awaiting trial. His presence here meant either a catastrophic security breach or Torres, she whispered urgently. We have a problem. Mendoza just walked in. He's supposed to be in custody. What? Torres's shock was evident even through the earpiece. That's impossible. He was transferred to federal holding yesterday. Well, he's here now, and he's coming straight toward us. Eliana's mind raced through options. Their cover was about to be blown if Mendoza recognized them, and there was no reason to think he wouldn't. The entire operation could be compromised. Max's training kicked in automatically. He shifted his position, placing himself between Eliana and the approaching threat while maintaining his service dog appearance. Mendoza stopped at the bar just 3 feet away, ordered a drink in Spanish, then turned to survey the club. His eyes passed over Eliana, once then returned, narrowing slightly. The moment of recognition was unmistakable. A slow smile spread across his face as he raised his glass in a mocking toast. Officer Reyes, he said, his voice just loud enough for her to hear over the music. Or should I say, Detective Now. Promotions come quickly when you foil a bombing, I imagine. Eliana maintained her composure, though her heart hammered in her chest. You're supposed to be in federal custody, Mendoza. He shrugged, taking a sip of his drink. The Valdez family has friends everywhere, even in places you think are secure. His eyes dropped to Max, who was watching him intently. "And El Fantasma still by your side, I see. What do you want?" Eliana asked, her hand dropping casually to her side, where her concealed weapon waited. "Want nothing at all. I'm simply enjoying the club. Though I am curious why you're here." He gestured around them. "This doesn't seem like your usual scene." Through her earpiece, Eliana could hear Torres issuing rapid orders, mobilizing backup. But help would take minutes they might not have. "We need to extract you," Torres said urgently. "This operation is compromised." But Eliana saw an opportunity. Mendoza's appearance wasn't just a threat. It was confirmation that something important was happening at the club tonight. Something worth risking exposure for. "Actually," she said to Mendoza, maintaining eye contact, "I'm here because I have a proposition for your employer." Mendoza's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "Is that so?" "Internal Affairs has been watching me since the ceremony incident. They think I took something from the warehouse raid, something valuable." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "They're right." "Reyes, what are you doing?" Torres demanded in her ear. Mendoza studied her face, looking for deception. "And why would you tell me this?" "Because a cop's salary doesn't go far in Atlanta these days. And because I know what happens to people who cross the Valdez family." She gestured subtly to Max. "Even my partner understands self-preservation." Max, picking up on her cues, had relaxed his posture slightly, though his eyes never left Mendoza. "This is a dangerous game you're playing," Mendoza said, his voice taking on a new edge. "No game, just business. Tell Emilio I have something he wants and I'm willing to discuss terms." Mendoza considered this for a long moment, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "Someone will contact you, but know this: if you're lying, no badge will protect you." With that, he finished his drink and walked away, disappearing into the crowd toward the VIP section. "Torres," Eliana said once he was out of earshot. "Did you get all that?" Every word came the tense reply. "Get out of there now. We need to talk about this unauthorized change of plans." As they made their way toward the exit, Eliana felt Max press against her leg, his signal that they were being watched. She didn't need to look to know that Mendoza's appearance had been no coincidence. The cartel had known they were coming, which meant their task force had a leak. Outside in the cool night air, Eliana took a deep breath and steadying herself. "We've been compromised from the beginning," she told Torres. "But now we have a way in, or a way to get yourself killed." Torres replied, "Return to base immediately. We need to reassess." As they walked away from the pulsing lights of Azul Lounge, Eliana couldn't shake the feeling that they had just crossed a threshold. What had begun as simple reconnaissance had become something far more dangerous, a direct challenge to one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country. Max walked silently beside her, his presence a reassuring constant in a situation that had suddenly become unpredictable. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as they always had. But first they needed to find the leak before it found them. The task force headquarters buzzed with tense energy as Eliana and Max entered the conference room. All eyes turned to them, some curious, others openly hostile. Word of their encounter with Mendoza had spread quickly. "What the hell were you thinking?" Agent Delgado demanded, rising from his seat. "You just compromised months of preparation." Torres raised a hand, silencing him. "Let's hear Officer Reyes out before we start throwing accusations." Eliana moved to the front of the room, Max staying close by her side. "First, we need to address the fact that Rafael Mendoza is walking free when he should be in federal custody. That means we have a serious security breach. We're already investigating that. Torres confirmed preliminary reports suggest he was transferred out last night under falsified paperwork. Someone with high-level clearance made it happen. Which brings me to my second point." Eliana continued, "The cartel knew we would be at the club tonight. They were waiting for us. That means someone in this task force is feeding them information." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Officers and agents exchanged glances, suspicion suddenly palpable in the room. That's a serious allegation. Delgado said, his voice lower, but no less intense. It's not an allegation, it's a fact. Ileana replied firmly. And it's why I made the decision to pivot our approach when Mendoza approached me. If they already knew we were investigating, we needed to control the narrative. Torres studied her for a moment. You're suggesting we use this situation, turn a compromise into an advantage? Exactly. We've been trying to infiltrate the Valdez organization for years without success. Now we have a potential way in me. The room erupted in overlapping voices, arguments for and against the idea of flying back and forth. Torres silenced them with a sharp whistle. Enough that this isn't a debate club. She turned to Ileana. Walk us through what you're proposing. Ileana moved to the digital display, pulling up the organizational chart of the Valdez cartel. We know from Blackwood that Emilio Valdez is paranoid about electronic surveillance. That's why he uses physical ledgers for his most sensitive financial information. If I can position myself as a corrupt officer willing to sell information, we might be able to get access to those records. Cananino, Kerchao, and Maximas Torres asked. The cartel seems particularly fixated on him. That's our advantage. They're superstitious about him. They call him El Fantasma because they believe he can sense things other dogs can't. We can use that fear. Officer Washington from Financial Crimes spoke up. Even if they believe your story about stealing evidence, why would they trust you enough to let you near their operation? They won't not at first, Ileana acknowledged, but they'll be curious enough to make contact. And when they do, we'll have a chance to plant the seeds of trust. Torres considered this for a long moment. It's risky, extremely risky if they discover you're playing them. I understand the risk, Ileana said quietly. But Max and I have faced these odds before. After another hour of debate and planning, Torres made her decision. We'll proceed with Officer Reyes's undercover approach, but with extensive safeguards. Nothing happens without my direct approval. And at the first sign that her cover is in jeopardy, we pull her out. No questions, no delays. As the meeting dispersed, Torres asked Ileana and Max to remain behind. When they were alone, her professional demeanor softened slightly. I need to know something, and I need the truth, she said, leaning against the conference table. Is this about justice, or is it personal for you? Ileana considered the question, her hand absently finding its way to Max's head. After what they tried to do at the ceremony, after learning they specifically targeted Max? Yes, it's personal, but that doesn't mean I'll let emotion cloud my judgment. Torres nodded slowly. Good, because Emilio Valdez isn't just some drug dealer. He's a sophisticated criminal who's eliminated every undercover operative who's ever gotten close to him. The only reason I'm agreeing to this plan is because of what I've heard about you and Max, that you have an almost supernatural ability to read situations and react accordingly. There's nothing supernatural about it, Ileana replied. Just years of training and trust. Whatever it is, Torres said, you're going to need it because starting tomorrow you're walking into the lion's den. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Ileana's undercover identity was carefully constructed. Financial troubles, a disciplinary record that suggested a growing disillusionment with police work, and subtle digital breadcrumbs suggesting she had indeed taken something valuable from the warehouse raid. Max underwent specialized training to adapt his behavior for their cover story. He needed to maintain his alertness and protective instincts while appearing to be just slightly less disciplined than before, as if Ileana's corruption had affected his training as well. On the third day after the nightclub encounter, the contact they had been waiting for arrived. Ileana was shopping at a farmer's market, a normal Saturday activity that was part of establishing her routine for surveillance, when a well-dressed woman approached her. Officer Reyes, the woman said quietly, falling into step beside her. Or are you off duty today? Ileana recognized her immediately from the briefing materials. Sofia Valdez, Emilio's cousin and political fixer. I'm always on duty, Ileana replied, continuing to examine the produce as if this were a casual conversation. Max at her side remained calm but watchful. My cousin is intrigued by your proposition, Sofia said, selecting an apple and examining it with feigned interest. He wonders what exactly you believe you have that would be of value to him. information access, and a particular item recovered during the warehouse raid that never made it into evidence. Sophia raised an eyebrow. And what would this item be? A ledger, small black book with red binding. I believe it contains names that would be very problematic if they became public. This was the bait, a fabricated item based on intelligence from Blackwood about what would most interest Valdez. The reaction on Sophia's face confirmed they had guessed correctly. If such an item exists, Sophia said carefully, it would indeed be valuable. But why come to us now? Why not when you first took it? Because until recently I had options. Now internal affairs is closing in and I need resources to disappear if necessary. Eliana explained, maintaining her casual demeanor while scanning for surveillance. The warehouse raid put a target on my back from both sides. I'm just trying to survive. Sophia studied her for a long moment, then glanced down at Max. And your partner? He seems different than I expected. Max goes where I go, Eliana said firmly. He's loyal to me, not the department. This was a critical moment. The cartel's fascination with Max could either strengthen their cover or expose it entirely. Sophia crouched slightly, extending her hand toward Max, a test of his reaction. Max, perfectly playing his role, sniffed her hand cautiously before allowing her to touch his head. To anyone watching, he appeared like a well-trained but ordinary police dog, not the almost mythical El Fantasma the cartel feared. Emilio would like to meet, Sophia said, finally straightening up, tonight to discuss terms. Where and when? The Botanical Gardens annual fundraising gala. Emilio is a major donor. Sophia handed her what appeared to be a business card, but was actually an invitation. 8 p.m. Come alone except for him, of course. She nodded toward Max. As Sophia walked away, Eliana continued her shopping, giving no indication that anything significant had transpired. Only when she was certain she wasn't being watched did she touch the concealed communication device in her ear. Did you get all that? She sub-vocalized. Every word Torres confirmed through the tiny earpiece. We're already securing access to the gala. Backup will be in place but distant. We can't risk them spotting our surveillance. Duh. Understood, I'll head home to prepare. That evening, Eliana stood before her mirror, hardly recognizing herself. Gone was the practical police officer in tactical gear or casual clothes. In her place stood a woman in an elegant black dress, her hair styled professionally, subtle makeup enhancing her features. The transformation was completed by carefully selected jewelry that contained concealed recording devices. Max watched her from his position by the door, already wearing his special tactical harness disguised as formal service dog equipment. The harness included hidden compartments for emergency extraction tools and a panic button that would signal immediate danger. Well, partner, Eliana said, kneeling to adjust his collar, ready to attend our first gala. Max's soft whine might have seemed like ordinary dog communication to anyone else, but Eliana understood its meaning perfectly. Concern, readiness, determination. After 5 years together, they could communicate volumes without words. I know, she replied softly. I'm nervous too, but we faced worse odds. She thought back to their first major operation together, a hostage situation that had gone sideways when their backup was delayed. They'd been alone against 3 armed suspects with civilian lives hanging in the balance. That day, they developed the silent communication system that had saved their lives countless times since. Same rules as always. We trust each other, we watch each other's backs, and if either of us signals abort, we get out immediately, no questions asked. The Atlanta Botanical Gardens had been transformed for the annual fundraising gala. Thousands of twinkling lights illuminated the pathways. Elegant music drifted through the air, and Atlanta's wealthiest citizens mingled among exotic plants and sculptural installations. Eliana arrived precisely at 8, her invitation gaining her immediate entry. Max walked beside her, his behavior impeccable, alert, but calm, the perfect service animal. Several guests gave them curious glances, but in a city accustomed to wealth and eccentricity, a beautiful woman accompanied by a Belgian Malinois hardly warranted sustained attention. Target spotted, came Torres's voice through her earpiece. Northwest corner of the orchid display. He's with 3 others. Looks like security. Eliana made her way through the crowd, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter, but not drinking. She needed all her faculties sharp tonight. Emilio Valdez stood exactly where Torres had indicated, engaged in conversation with a silver-haired man Eliana recognized as a prominent city councilman. At 42, Valdez cut an impressive figure-tailored suit, confident posture, the easy charm of a man accustomed to power. Only the slight hardness around his eyes betrayed his true nature. As Eliana approached, Sophia materialized at her side. "He's been expecting you," she said quietly. "Remember, this is a public place. Discretion is essential." Eliana nodded, allowing herself to be guided toward Valdez. Max stayed close, his body language relaxed, but his eyes constantly scanning. "Ah, Miss Reyes." Valdez greeted her with practiced warmth, excusing himself from his previous conversation. "Sophia has told me about your situation. I'm intrigued." "Mr. Valdez." Eliana acknowledged with a slight nod. "Thank you for agreeing to meet, Pirato." "How could I resist? It's not every day that one of Atlanta's finest reaches out with such an interesting proposition." His gaze shifted to Max. "And this must be the famous Max. I've heard remarkable things about his abilities." "He's exceptional at his job," Eliana replied carefully, "which is why he's valuable to me and potentially to you." Valdez gestured toward a more secluded area of the gardens. "Shall we discuss this somewhere more private?" Yuri. They moved to a small, Japanese-inspired garden enclosed by bamboo screens that provided visual privacy, while still being public enough to maintain appearances. Valdez's security positioned themselves discreetly at the perimeter. "I understand you believe you have something of mine," Valdez began once they were seated on an elegant stone bench. "Something taken during an unfortunate incident at one of my business properties. A ledger," Eliana confirmed, "small black leather with red binding. Contains names, dates, amounts, the kind of information that could be problematic in the wrong hands." Valdez's expression remained neutral, but a slight tension in his shoulders told Eliana they had guessed correctly about the ledger's importance. "And how did you come to possess this item?" he asked. "I was told all evidence was processed according to procedure with Hasaman." "Most of it was," Eliana replied. "But in the chaos of the raid, certain items were misplaced. I recognized its value immediately." "Yet you didn't come forward until now, because until recently it was my insurance policy. Now it's becoming a liability." She leaned forward slightly. "Internal Affairs is investigating discrepancies in the evidence log. It's only a matter of time before they connect the dots." Valdez studied her face, looking for deception. Max, sensing the tension, shifted slightly closer to Eliana. "Your dog seems very protective," Valdez observed. "My men have a name for him. Did you know El Fantasma? They say he can sense things other dogs cannot." "Max is highly trained," Eliana said simply. "We've been partners for 5 years, and yet you're willing to betray your oath, your department. What does your partner think of that, I wonder?" The question was cleverly designed to test her to look for inconsistencies in her story. Eliana had prepared for this. "Max is loyal to me, not to a badge or a building. He follows my lead." She met Valdez's gaze steadily. "And my lead is telling me that self-preservation matters more than abstract ideals about justice." Valdez nodded slowly, seeming to accept this. "What exactly are you proposing, Officer Reyes? A trade the ledger for financial compensation and certain guarantees I need to know. I'm protected when this all comes to light." "And what would prevent you from making copies, from using this information to extort more from me in the future?" "Across her common sense," Eliana replied. "I understand the consequences of betraying someone like you. I'm looking for a clean break, not a recurring arrangement." Valdez considered this, his fingers tapping lightly against his knee, the first sign of genuine emotion he displayed. "I would need to verify the authenticity of this ledger before any agreement could be reached," he said finally. "Of course, but I'd need assurances of my safety first." A slight smile played at the corners of Valdez's mouth. "Cautious, I appreciate that quality." He reached into his jacket, causing Max to tense imperceptibly, but withdrew only a business card. "This has a secure number," Call tomorrow at noon exactly. We'll arrange the verification. As Eliana took the card, Valdez's fingers lingered against hers slightly longer than necessary. One more thing, Officer Reyes. If you're playing some elaborate game, you should know that I don't respond well to deception. Many have tried to infiltrate my organization. None have succeeded. The threat was delivered with such casual pleasantness that it seemed almost friendly, but Eliana felt its weight nonetheless. I understand completely, she replied, matching his tone. Deception would be foolish given your resources. Valdez stood signaling the end of their meeting. Until tomorrow, then enjoy the gala. As he walked away, rejoining the main party with Sophia at his side, Eliana remained seated for a moment, collecting herself. Max pressed against her leg, a gesture of solidarity that meant more than words could express. Torres, did you get all that? She whispered once she was certain no one was in earshot. Every word became the response. You did well. He's interested but cautious. The verification meeting will be the real test. Mishwanti Yuriwanti Naman. Eliana rose, adjusting her dress. He'll have me investigated thoroughly before then. Is our cover solid? As solid as we could make it. Financial records, disciplinary reports, even carefully planted rumors among officers who might be approached. If they dig, they'll find exactly what we want them to find. As Eliana made her way back through the gala, she maintained her cover, pausing occasionally to admire the botanical displays or exchange pleasantries with other guests. But her mind was racing, analyzing every nuance of the conversation with Valdez. He was more intelligent than she had anticipated, more perceptive. The way he had studied Max, the subtle tests in his questions, he was not a man easily deceived. And yet they had taken the first crucial step. The hook had been baited, and Valdez had shown interest. Now came the dangerous part, reeling him in without being pulled under themselves. Later that night, as Eliana debriefed with Torres and the core task force team, the full complexity of their situation became clear. He'll want proof of the ledger's existence before proceeding further. Torres explained, We've prepared a convincing facsimile based on Blackwood's descriptions with just enough authentic information to seem legitimate or ain't of shukshinoi. And what about the verification meeting? Eliana asked. He'll choose the location, control all aspects of the encounter, which is why we need to be prepared for anything. Torres replied, including the possibility that this is a trap, that he already suspects you're undercover. The thought hung heavily in the air. If Valdez had even the slightest suspicion about her true intentions, the verification meeting could be a death sentence. We'll have multiple extraction plans in place, Agent Delgado assured her, and the best surveillance technology available. You won't be truly alone. But as the meeting concluded and Eliana prepared to leave, Officer Washington pulled her aside. There's something you should know, she said quietly. The leak in the task force, we've narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. One of them is someone in this room tonight. Eliana felt a chill run through her. Who? We don't know yet, but be careful what information you share even here. With that sobering thought, Eliana and Max returned to their apartment. As she prepared for bed, removing her elegant attire and securing their recording devices, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Max settled into his bed near the window, his vigilant gaze sweeping the darkened street below before returning to Eliana. I know, buddy, she said softly. I'm worried too, but we've come this far. As she turned out the light, Eliana thought about Valdez's words. Many have tried to infiltrate my organization. None have succeeded. The implication was clear. Those who had tried were no longer alive to tell the tale. But then none of them had had Max by their side, and that Eliana believed might make all the difference. Precisely at noon the following day, Eliana made the call from a burner phone provided by the task force. The number connected immediately, but instead of Valdez's voice, she heard only an automated message. Corner of Peachtree and 10th Blue Sedan, 10 minutes. Quinchin. The location was a busy intersection in Midtown Atlanta. Public crowded, difficult to surveil. The timing left minimal opportunity for the task force to prepare, which was undoubtedly intentional. They're testing your ability to follow instructions, Torres said through the secure communication channel, as Eliana and Max made their way toward the meeting point. and trying to shake any surveillance. I expected as much, Eliana replied, maintaining a casual pace despite her racing heart. She wore civilian clothes, jeans, a light jacket, sunglasses with Max walking obediently beside her. Stay back as planned. If this goes sideways, I'll signal world. The blue sedan was exactly where the message had indicated, its engine running, a driver with dark sunglasses waiting behind the wheel. As Eliana approached, the back door opened. "Get in," came a familiar voice, Sofia Valdez. The dog, too. Elena hesitated just long enough to appear cautious but not suspicious, then climbed into the vehicle with Max following closely. The door closed automatically behind them, and the car pulled smoothly into traffic. "Your phone," Sofia demanded, extending her hand. Eliana surrendered the burner phone, which Sofia immediately dropped into a signal-blocking bag. "Standard precaution," she explained with a thin smile. "I'm sure you understand." "Of course," Eliana replied, keeping her tone neutral. The sedan moved through midtown traffic, taking a series of turns designed to reveal any surveillance. Eliana noted that they passed the same coffee shop twice, a classic counter-surveillance technique. Finally satisfied, Sofia spoke again. "Emilio was impressed by your directness yesterday. That's rare in our world. In my experience, complications only increase risk." Eliana said, "And I've seen enough risk in my career." Sofia nodded approvingly. "A practical approach. Tell me what made you decide to reach out to us. There must have been other options for someone in your position." The question was another test probing for inconsistencies in her story. Eliana had prepared thoroughly for this. "When I realized what I had, I researched all my options. Witness protection would mean disappearing completely, losing everything. Selling to a rival organization would make me a target for Valdez. Going public would end my career and probably my life." She shrugged slightly. Coming directly to the source seemed the cleanest solution. "And yet," Sofia pressed, "you must know that dealing with us carries its own risks." "Everything carries risk. I'm choosing the devil I know." This earned a genuine laugh from Sofia. "Oh, I like you, Officer Reyes. You have no idea how refreshing it is to deal with someone who doesn't waste time with moral posturing or fear." The car turned onto a quiet residential street in Buckhead, Atlanta's most affluent neighborhood, eventually pulling into the driveway of an elegant Tudor-style mansion set back from the road. The privacy gate closed behind them, cutting off any possibility of surveillance from the street. "We're here," Sofia announced unnecessarily. Emilio was waiting inside. As they exited the vehicle, Eliana took stock of their surroundings. The property was extensive, with manicured gardens and strategic landscaping that provided both beauty and security. Two men in suits, obviously security personnel, stood near the front entrance while security cameras covered every approach. Max stayed close to her side, his demeanor calm but alert. They had trained extensively for this moment, preparing for various scenarios that might unfold. The key was to appear confident but not reckless, cautious but not paranoid. Inside the mansion revealed tasteful luxury artwork that Eliana recognized as museum-quality furniture that spoke of old money rather than nouveau riche ostentation. They were led through a series of rooms to a sunlit conservatory at the back of the house where Emilio Valdez sat reading financial reports. "I run Officer Reyes." He greeted her, setting aside his papers. "Thank you for being punctual, a quality I value highly." "Mr. Valdez," Eliana acknowledged with a slight nod. "Please sit. Would you care for something to drink? Coffee, perhaps, or something stronger?" "No. Coffee would be fine, thank you." Valdez nodded to an attendant who disappeared to fulfill the request. Max settled at Eliana's feet as she took a seat across from Valdez. "Your dog seems comfortable in these surroundings," Valdez observed. "Not what one would expect from a police K9. Max adapts quickly. It's one of his strengths." and work forward. Ishania Rashtoshinoramin, hey show. Rivera hesitated. Reyes, this guy's cornered and armed, even with SWAT backup, Siopi Tiranon, da Sikranani Maitikan. Max can locate him without being detected. Eliana assured him, we've done this before. Minutes later, they were moving through the silent hallways of the school. Max leading the way with focused precision, a small SWAT team followed at Eliana's direction, maintaining enough distance to avoid interfering with Max's tracking, but close enough to provide immediate support if needed. The tension was palpable as they moved deeper into the building. Through classroom windows, Eliana could see students and teachers huddled in corners, following lockdown protocols. The weight of responsibility, hundreds of lives potentially hanging in the balance, pressed heavily on her shoulders. Max paused at an intersection, his nose working the air currents. With subtle signals that only Eliana could interpret, he indicated a change in direction, east toward the library. And he's moving toward the library, she whispered into her radio. Possible hostage situations developing. Copy that. Rivera responded, secondary team moving to secure alternate exits. They approached the library doors cautiously. Max's behavior shifted slightly, ears forward, body tense but not aggressive. Eliana recognized the pattern. The subject was just beyond these doors, but not in attack posture. With hand signals, she positioned the SWAT team members, then gave Max a specific command they had practiced for hostage scenarios, a silent approach focused on a distraction rather than direct engagement. On her count, they breached the library doors. The scene inside was not what they had expected. Instead of a hardened criminal with hostages, they found a teenage boy, perhaps 16, sitting alone at a table with what appeared to be a handgun placed in front of him. His face was streaked with tears, his body language conveying despair rather than aggression. Police don't move. The SWAT team commanded, weapons trained on the boy, but Eliana had already assessed the situation differently. Hold positions, she ordered, stepping forward with Max at her side. Cover us, but hold fire. The boy looked up, startled by their entrance, but making no move toward the weapon. I wasn't going to hurt anyone, he said, his voice breaking. I just didn't know what else to do. Eliana approached carefully Max, moving slightly ahead of her. Not in attack position, but in the calming posture they had developed for situations involving mental health crises. My name is Detective Reyes, she said gently. This is Max. We're here to help, not hurt you. Can you tell me your name? Tyler, the boy replied, his eyes fixed on Max with a mixture of fear and fascination. Tyler, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them while we talk. Can you do that for me? He nodded, placing his hands flat on the table, well away from the weapon. Good, that's really good, Tyler. Eliana maintained a calm, steady voice as she continued to approach. Can you tell me what's going on today? As Tyler began to speak a heartbreaking story of bullying, family problems, and desperation, Max moved closer to him, his behavior shifting to what Eliana recognized as his response to emotional distress rather than physical threat. Your dog, he's not barking at me. Tyler observed momentarily, distracted from his pain. Max is very good at reading people. Eliana explained now, close enough to secure the weapon if necessary. He can tell the difference between someone who wants to hurt others and someone who's hurting inside. This simple acknowledgement of his pain seemed to reach Tyler in a way that commands and threats could not. His shoulders slumped and fresh tears began to fall. I wasn't really going to use it, he admitted. It's not even real. It's my dad's old training pistol. I just wanted them to stop to take me seriously for once. Eliana nodded to one of the SWAT officers who moved forward to secure the weapon, confirming it was indeed a realistic-looking training pistol with no firing capability. Betrayed to Tyler, I believe you, Eliana said, sitting down across from him while Max settled at her side. And I want to help make sure you get the support you need. But first we need to make sure everyone in the school is safe. Can you help us do that? The situation de-escalated rapidly after that. What had begun as a potential active shooter response transformed into a mental health intervention. As medical professionals arrived to evaluate Tyler, Eliana and Max remained with him, providing a reassuring presence until his parents could be contacted. Later, as they debriefed with Captain Winters back at the precinct, the full impact of their approach became clear. The The school superintendent called Winters informed them, said your handling of the situation was nothing short of miraculous. The kid's already talking to counselors, getting the help he needed all along. Elena nodded, processing this information while absently stroking Max's head. He wasn't a threat to others. He was crying out for help, the only way he knew how. And somehow Max knew that before any of us did. Winters observed, before you even entered the room. It's what makes him special. Eliana acknowledged not just his training, but his ability to read human emotions, to distinguish between different kinds of distress. El Fantasma, Winters said with a slight smile. Maybe the cartel wasn't entirely wrong about him after all. Elena shook her head, but she was smiling too. No ghosts, no supernatural powers, just an extraordinary dog with an exceptional ability to connect with humans, even those in their darkest moments. As they left the precinct that evening, heading home for a well-deserved rest, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the warehouse raid to the confrontation with Valdez, from medals and ceremonies to quiet moments of connection, like today's intervention, each experience had deepened their partnership in ways she could never have anticipated when they were first paired 5 years ago. Max walked beside her, his stride matching hers perfectly. His presence a constant reminder of what made their partnership special. Not mystical abilities or supernatural senses, but trust, communication, and an unbreakable bond forged through shared purpose and mutual respect. You know what, partner, she said as they reached their vehicle. Maybe we should take the FBI up on that training offer. There are probably other handlers and dogs out there who could benefit from what we've learned together. Max looked up at her, his amber eyes reflecting the streetlights, and gave a soft whine of agreement. Because that was the true legacy of their partnership, not just the cases they solved or the lives they saved, but the example they set of what was possible when human and canine worked together as equals, each bringing their unique strengths to create something greater than the sum of its parts. As they drove home through the Atlanta evening, Eliana knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together, not as handler and dog, but as partners in the truest sense of the word. And in a world where danger could appear at any moment, where the line between safety and threat was often razor thin, that partnership was the most valuable asset they possessed, a bond that no medal could honor adequately and no ceremony could fully recognize. It was quite simply the foundation upon which everything else was built, and it was unbreakable.